Hey guys, welcome to today's story time. My name is Sienna Carter, and I was 29 years old when my mother, Elena, decided that throwing me out of her house was not enough. She wanted a crowd for it. She wanted music and food and witnesses. She wanted neighbors standing around with paper plates in their hands, while she played the role of exhausted single mother, finally setting a boundary with her ungrateful daughter. What she didn't know was that the same weekend she planned my public humiliation, I was already unraveling another. Betrayal, one that cut deeper than any banner or hot dog thrown at my car. I was engaged to Jackson Reed, 31, a marketing guru who charmed me into thinking he was my safe place, while he and his sister, Mila, plotted to steal the savings I quietly built from my remote operations consulting work. When I pulled into the driveway that Saturday afternoon to pick up the last box of my belongings, the first thing I saw was a huge vinyl banner hanging over the garage. "Goodbye, Freeloader, don't come back." The grill smoke drifted across the front yard. Country music blasted from a cheap speaker near the patio. Somebody had strung up little red and white pennants across the fence like it was a summer cookout instead of a public humiliation. At first, I just sat there with both hands still on the steering wheel, my mind racing not just from the anger of the banner, but from the text I'd found on Jackson's phone the night before him telling Mila, "Once we're married, her savings are ours. We'll pay off my debt and buy that beach house. She's too stupid to notice." I remember the heat inside the car and the way the sunlight bounced off the windshield. I remember hearing laughter before I even opened the door. Then my Uncle Jake staggered into view from the patio, red-faced, beer bottle in hand, already drunk enough to forget what volume was. "Snorts, look who's here." He squinted toward my car and shouted loud enough for the neighbors 2 houses down to hear that maybe now my mother could finally stop feeding a grown woman who had never built a real career. Someone laughed. Another voice joined in and said, "She should be ashamed." Then something soft and greasy hit the side of my car and slid down the door. My younger brother, Cade, 24, was doubled over laughing beside the cooler. He pointed at the hot dog now smeared against the paint and yelled that there was my last free meal. Even the kids from next door started laughing because children learn very quickly what kind of cruelty gets approved by adults. I stepped out of the car and the sound seemed to sharpen plates clinking. A lawn chair scraping the patio, somebody muttering, "There she is." My mother, Elena, turned from the grill with a pair of tongs in one hand and the smile she always wore when she thought she had total control of the room. She looked beautiful in a cold, deliberate way, white linen shorts, gold hoop earrings, perfect blowout. Her sunglasses sat on top of her head like a crown. She spread her arms as if she were greeting an honored guest and not the daughter she just made into entertainment. "Look who finally came to collect her junk," she called out. A few people laughed harder. It was that easy for them. I had spent years making their lives easier covering Elena's event planning business bills when her checks bounced, paying Cade's rent when he lost his job as a bartender, bailing Jake out of minor dues all while working 60-hour weeks as an operations consultant for small businesses. And all it took was one banner and a few ugly jokes for them to decide I had always been the burden. But that was the thing about families like mine. They repeat a lie so often that by the time they say it out loud in public, it no longer feels like a lie. It feels like history. I did not yell back. I did not cry. I did not ask my mother what kind of woman celebrates throwing out her own child. I walked past all of them and into the house, my mind replaying Jackson's text, Nila's reply. "Make sure she signs the prenup I drafted. She won't read the fine print. We'll own half her consulting business too." The music from outside sounded muffled through the walls. The kitchen still smelled faintly like the lemon cleaner I had bought last month because my mother liked the expensive kind, but I claimed money was tight. I moved through the hallway and into the mudroom where my last box sat on the bench. There was a plastic grocery bag on top of it with a note written in thick black marker, "Starter kit." Inside were instant noodles, dryer sheets, a half-used bottle of dish soap, and a printed list of rundown apartment complexes in the area. It was so childish I almost laughed. That was what struck me most that day, not just the cruelty, but the effort. They had planned little details. They had taken time to stage my humiliation. Meanwhile, Jackson was probably with Nilla, laughing about how easy it would be to drain my accounts once we said, "I do." I picked up the box, tucked it against my hip, and walked back through the kitchen to the front door. When I stepped outside again, the backyard crowd fell into that hungry half-silence people get when they think the real show is about to start. My Uncle Jake raised his beer and shouted that my poor mother had carried me long enough. Then he said something about my late father being ashamed if he could see me now. That was the only line that really cut because he knew exactly where to stick the knife. My father had been dead for 8 years. Jake knew that. He smiled while he said it. Cade laughed and grabbed another hot dog from the tray like he was considering throwing a second one. My mother did not stop any of it. She just stood there with her tongs, chin lifted, letting the moment happen because leadership in a toxic family is often just permission for everyone else to be as cruel as they want. I set the box in my trunk. Then I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and turned toward the garage. I framed the banner and the people standing under it, my mother by the grill, Jake on the patio, Cade near the cooler, the neighbors smiling in that careful, detached way. I took one clear photo. My mother saw me and frowned. "What is that for?" She asked, "Your pity diary?" I looked straight at her, and for the first time since arriving, I spoke. "No," I said, "for later." Then I got into my car, backed out of the driveway, and left without another word. They were still laughing when I turned the corner. I drove straight to the coffee shop where I'd arranged to meet Jackson. He thought we were picking out wedding invitations. I had other plans. The truth about Jackson and Mila had unfolded slowly. I noticed small things first. Jackson borrowing my credit card to pay a utility bill and never paying it back. Mila asking invasive questions about my consulting clients and my savings. Jackson pushing me to sign a prenup he claimed was standard, but refused to let me show to a lawyer. 2 weeks earlier, I'd found a folder in his backpack, a forged copy of my consulting contract, a fake power of attorney, and emails between him and Mila detailing their plan to transfer my savings to a joint account they'd opened in both their names. They even planned to tell my clients I was stepping back from my business so Mila, who had no experience in operations, could take over. I quietly made copies of everything. The emails, the forged documents, the bank statements showing Jackson's secret debt. I'd also met with a lawyer who helped me freeze my savings and set up a trust to protect my business. I'd even recorded a conversation with Jackson where he admitted the plan, thinking I was too in love to catch on. The coffee shop was quiet, the air cool with the smell of vanilla latte. Jackson was already there, wearing the navy button-down I bought him, a fake smile on his face. "Hey baby," he said, standing up to hug me. I stepped back, my expression cold. "Sit down," I said. His smile faltered. "What's wrong?" Mila walked in a minute later, carrying a folder of wedding invitations. She froze when she saw my face. "Sienna? Is everything okay?" I set my phone on the table, pressed play, and Jackson's voice filled the small space. "Once we're married, we'll drain her savings. Mela, you'll take over her consulting clients. She won't suspect a thing. She's too busy trying to please everyone to notice we're stealing from her." Jackson's face turned white. Mela stumbled back, knocking over her chair. "That's taken out of context," she shouted. I slid the folder of evidence across the table: emails, forged documents, bank statements. "Is this out of context too?" I asked. "The fake power of attorney? The joint account you opened to steal my money? The way you planned to ruin my business so you could pay off Jackson's debt?" A few people in the coffee shop stared, but I didn't care. I'd spent too long being quiet, too long pretending everything was okay. Jackson tried to grab my hand. "Sienna, I'm sorry." I was desperate. "We can fix this." I pulled my hand away. "Fix it?" I laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "You and your sister plan to steal everything I've worked for. You pretended to love me so you could use me. There's nothing to fix." I pulled out a stack of papers, divorce papers. We'd gotten married in a small civil ceremony 3 months earlier, thinking we'd have a big wedding later and a lawsuit filing for fraud and identity theft. "I'm filing for divorce. I'm suing you and Mila for every penny you tried to steal. And just so you know, my lawyer has already sent these documents to your boss. He'll probably love to hear that his star marketer is a fraud who steals from his wife." Jackson's mouth dropped open. "You wouldn't do that." "Try me," I said. Mela started crying, begging me not to ruin their lives. "You're being cruel," she shouted. I stood up, grabbing my bag. "Cruel is pretending to love someone so you can steal from them. Cruel is letting your family humiliate me while you plot my downfall. I'm not being cruel. I'm being free." 2 weeks later, my phone lit up with messages from Elena, Jake, and Kate begging me to call back. The event planning business Elena ran was falling apart without me covering her bills. Vendors were threatening to sue, her warehouse lease was about to default, and a major wedding client had dropped her after she messed up the setup. Jackson and Mila were in even worse shape. Jackson had been fired, Mila was being investigated for fraud, and their joint account had been frozen. They all wanted my help like nothing had happened. But in that moment at the barbecue, they thought they had won. They thought they had just filmed the final scene of my humiliation. What they had actually done was capture the exact second before their safety net drove away. The version my family told everyone was clean and simple. I was almost 30, unmarried. They conveniently forgot about the civil ceremony, living back at home and working from a laptop doing a job none of them respected. In their version, I had returned to my mother's house after life failed to launch. I stayed too long. I contributed too little. I drifted around under the roof of a woman kind enough to keep me afloat even though I had not earned it. That story played extremely well at church lunches, neighborhood cookouts, and under passive-aggressive comments on social media where people left phrases like tough love and wake-up call. The truth was less tidy and much less flattering to the people telling it. 3 years earlier, Elena's event planning business, Elena's Elegant Events, had started bleeding money. It sounded fancier than it was, just a small operation renting linens, chairs, and decor for weddings and parties in Tampa. From the outside, it looked healthy. Branded trucks, a polished website, Elena dressed in designer blouses. But inside, it was chaos. Inventory miscounted, deposits mislogged, vendor bills unpaid. I moved back in after my lease ended, not because I was a freeloader, but because Elena begged me to help. I fixed her invoices, renegotiated her warehouse lease, and even covered her utility bills when she couldn't. I did the same for Kate and Jake, always quietly. Always without asking for anything in return. Meanwhile, Jackson was using my savings to pay off his credit card debt and buy expensive gifts for Mila. When I left Elena's house, I didn't go to one of the rundown apartments on her list. I moved into a small, clean one-bedroom in Charlotte, North Carolina, where a client had offered me a long-term contract that would double my income. I set up my home office, hung photos of my father, and started building a life that was mine, not one built around fixing everyone else's mistakes. Jackson and Mila settled the lawsuit out of court, paying me back every penny they'd tried to steal. Elena's business folded 6 months later. She sold what was left of her inventory to pay her debts. Kate got a steady job as a mechanic and stopped asking me for money. Jake went to rehab, finally getting sober. I still get calls from Elena sometimes. She never apologizes, but she asks about my life, about my business. I answer politely, but I never go back. I learned that day at the barbecue and that day at the coffee shop that love should never require you to be small, to be quiet, to be useful. It should never require you to ignore betrayal or humiliation. I was never the freeloader. I was the one holding everyone up while they plotted to tear me down. But I walked away. I took my life back. And that's the greatest victory of all, quiet, steady, and mine. Last month, I framed the photo from the barbecue, the banner, the laughter, the hot dog on my car. I keep it on my desk not as a reminder of the pain, but as a reminder of how far I've come. I'm 30 now, my consulting business is thriving, and I'm finally living for myself. I no longer confuse being useful with being loved. I no longer let people treat me like an afterthought. And that's the lesson. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from the people who hurt you, even if they're family, even if they're the person you thought you'd marry. Freedom isn't about forgetting the pain. It's about choosing yourself, even when it's hard. And for the first time in my life, I'm free.